Hey guys, JoINrbs here, bringing you another Long War 2 class review. Today I'm going to be talking about mid-game Shinobis. Shinobi are very odd to talk about in the mid and late game in the terms that I've been talking about all the other classes in. The reason for that is that they're almost always going to become my officers in any of my campaigns. At the start of the campaign, XCOM is very happy to fight at short range, things like flamethrowers, laser sights on shotguns, and sword attacks from Shinobis are very, very strong. And the missions are such that, you know, there are few enemies on them. You're often in urban environments. You can ambush them around corners. You can get into close range with enemies and feel good about it. As you get into mid and late game, you're more and more going to end up on more open maps against larger numbers of enemies, and you're also getting soldiers who are very good at fighting things at long range, whether that be because they have Shredstorm cannons attached to their wrists, or they have reliable sniper rifles or laser rifles, or they have, you know, long range cooldowns, whether that be a gunner's cooldowns or a psi operative's cooldowns or a specialist who is mind controlling robots or whatever. There are lots of ways all of a sudden for XCOM to do things at mid to long range, and the Shinobi really sticks out like a sore thumb because the Shinobi never picks up the ability to fight at long range throughout the entire campaign. At the same time though, Shinobi have become such a large investment through the early game where they're very, very strong that it doesn't make much sense to just jettison them and leave them as Haven advisors or something like that. Plus, they are genuinely good when they get into close range combat with enemies. And so the solution is basically always just going to be to make them your officer. That way, if you're in a situation where the Shinobi can't get into close range with an enemy, not safely able to do that for whatever reason, the Shinobi can just use officer abilities. Using officer abilities actually won't break the Shinobi's concealment because of Phantom, so you can just do, you know, a bunch of officer abilities during the first engagement and then go spot for the second pod, find it, kill it, rinse and repeat. That's going to be the normal Shinobi role, and they are okay if they have to fight with their sword, but it's not a normal thing for them to do, and so none of these perks really matter all that much. My Shinobis generally build into like dorky tanks with high base values on their sword damage, plus their swords, when upgraded, can hit enemies with stuns or burning. It's a 25% to stun or 50% to burning with the tier 2 and tier 3 swords. And they get a lot of sword attacks off, so like they're fine. But it doesn't matter that much which perks you pick. I'm not personally building around the soldier. I'm not super excited about like going Reaper on it and trying to let it go crazy because I just have mid to long range ways to do those things, and it's so much better to kill everything at mid to long range and not risk pulling a bunch of extra pods in the late game missions. So my Shinobis just become sort of derpy officers. I'm going to talk about these perks and say what I think about them, and then I'm also going to talk about the officer perks and give you an idea of which officer perks I like my Shinobis to have and why. So at Staff Sergeant, we're picking between Shadow Strike, Low Profile, and Blade Storm. Shadow Strike is so close to actually being really good here. So close. While concealed, gain 50% bonus aim and 50 bonus critical hit chance when attacking enemies. If you get to Master Sergeant and pick Conceal, you'll have 2 attacks per mission where you basically always hit, and you have very high crit chance. Unfortunately, Shinobis do such a horrific job of making use of 50 bonus aim, and don't have high enough crit to really make use of 50 crit chance. You can't turn this into a 100% chance to hit, 100% chance to crit reliably. You probably already had 100% chance to hit or something close to it, and you're not getting up to 100 chance to crit. So Shadow Strike is like pretty valuable, but you can't actually rely on it, and it's not really giving you relevant aim, and it's just not in its best place right here on this tree. There might be other soldiers. Not really. Yeah, it's just not a very good perk, I guess, come to think of it. Maybe if you had another soldier with Phantom from the AWC, Shadow Strike might be more exciting on that soldier, but it's not that great. on this Shinobi. I gave it, you know, a modest 4 out of 10 for alpha striking and 3 out of 10 for breakdowns, but have never actually taken the perk since like 1.2 or something, when you could combo it with pistol things from the AWC. Low profile is an okay perk, which I really just don't like that much. What low profile does is give you plus 15 defense if you're in low cover. And the reason that I'm just not very enthused about this is that you can just stand in heavy cover. Like, you can just engineer situations for yourself where you have heavy cover for your tanks. Unless your squad is very oddly put together, or the environment you're fighting in is very, very weird, you're sort of always going to have a few heavy cover tiles available, and you don't need that many tanks. You need like 1 or 2, and then you've got, you know, your sharpshooters, your rangers, your specialists in the back lines, just dealing tons and tons of damage, and those guys don't really care about being in cover at all. So I don't think that heavy cover is in short enough supply in this game for low profile to be that exciting on Shinobi. And also, Shinobis can't really do anything at like mid-range anyway, so if they have to be in low cover, they can just hunker. Whatever, it's fine. Yeah, I think low profile is okay, but definitely don't think it's a particularly strong perk on Shinobis. Bladestorm is my go-to pick at Staff Sergeant. Free sword attacks on any enemies that enter or attack from melee range. This will go off whenever you're like tanking something with combatives, which is very nice. If you're standing next to a muton, you know, it'll attack you, and you'll actually Bladestorm it plus counterattack, dealing quite a lot of damage with your sword. You can do that against mutons, against berserkers. You may end up hitting stun lancers with it. Drones are going to want to run at you. Zombies are going to run at you. There are all sorts of enemies in this game who love to run at your soldiers, and Bladestorm will proc on them. So this just deals a lot of damage. You don't have to overthink it. You're not really having to go out of your way to make Bladestorm incredible in a campaign. It just happens on its own because the AI tries to run at your soldiers and your Shinobis in the front line being a dorky tank. Give it a 5 for alpha striking, 6 for breakdowns. I don't think it's an incredible perk, but it will output some nice damage over the course of a mission, and it will be fine. You know, it's an okay, nice little increment to what the soldier does. At Tech Sergeant, we're picking between Hunter's Instincts, Evasive, and Reaper. 3 quite different perks, all 3 of which seem like they're quite strong. I would argue that Hunter's Instincts is not actually very strong on a Shinobi. Ranged attacks against flanked enemies deal +2 damage. If you look at the tree right now as we're selecting the perk, we have zilch, absolutely nothing to make us good at shooting a gun. Absolutely nothing. We've taken, you know, perks which are specifically making us good at swinging a sword. We have a perk that gives us concealment when the other members of our squad leave concealment, which means we really want to equip a SMG because that keeps concealment detection range lower for the enemies. Hunter's Instincts is in no way comboing at all with any other perk that we've taken on the tree so far, or the role of the Shinobi. So I gave it a 5 for alpha striking, 3 for breakdown. That's maybe generous. It is a very, very strong perk. Ranged attacks against flanked enemies deal +2 damage. If you're maybe having a high aim Shinobi, I believe Hunter's Instincts works with pistols. May have been turned off, and I haven't actually tried this since 1.4. But I believe you could maybe put together a pistol Shinobi who used Hunter's Instincts. It still wouldn't be that great. Whatever. There are other classes who deal so much more damage than this with guns. And if you're trying to make your Shinobi deal damage with a gun, you're really overthinking it. Use an Assault for that. The Assault is just a way better soldier at doing exactly the same thing. The Shinobi has all of these perks that let it be a dorky tank officer, and that's its natural role. Just stick with that. Evasive is my go-to pick at Tech Sergeant, plus 100 bonus dodge at the start of the mission is very nice. You're going to regularly be dodging attacks outright when enemies shoot at you because of Evasive, and even if you just turn the first regular hit against you into a graze, that's often like +5 effective hit points for the mission, because once you get into late, mid, and early late game, enemies are hitting you for quite a lot of damage a lot of the time. So I think Evasive is just an incredible defensive perk. I like it a lot, and that's my go-to. I give it 2 for Alpha Striking because it's strong enough that it does let you position pretty aggressively sometimes with the Shinobi, and 8 for Breakdowns. It's just extra effective defense, and it's very effective defense. Reaper is the most interesting perk at Tech Sergeant. You activate it, and it's sort of like Serial for your sword. So you have an attack that cannot miss the first time that you activate it, and then every time that you make that attack, you get given an extra action. Further melee attacks go down and down and down and down in damage, but Reaper is a powerful ability even if you just score 1 kill with it. If you run up to something, score 1 kill, and then chuck an incendiary grenade at a different thing with your extra action, that's perfectly fine. The reason that I go Evasive over Reaper is that on the really difficult missions in late game, that's just not something that I'm wanting to do. Running a soldier into the enemies is not particularly exciting to me on those missions. I'm more about, controlling the battlefield, hacking some enemy drones and stuff, which can tank fire for me, setting up a strong fire base and obliterating everything in front of me very deliberately in a very controlled way. Not by running my own soldiers into the enemies where they're at risk and playing around with perks like Reaper. So you can go sort of crazy with Reaper if you really dedicate to it, but why? Why do that? This is what I'm going to say over and over again for Shinobis. There are other soldiers who are so much easier to break late game with than Shinobis. Shinobis have very solid perks and play a vital role in your squad as scouts and as the most natural class to be your officers. And I really strongly think that you should just let that happen and build around that rock, your Shinobi officer, in, most of your squads, if not all of them. Alright, so next up, let's look at officer perks. Alright, so here we are looking at officer perks. This is where Shinobis get really interesting and become unique compared to other classes, in my opinion. We spend a lot of energy training our Shinobis to be great officers, and they just do it better than any other class. When you train somebody as an officer, they pick up Command, which is letting them end their turn to grant a bonus action to any visible member of the squad. And as you level your officer up more and more, you get more charges of Command, so you can do this, once at first, but then 2 or 3 times in a single battle. It's a very, very powerful thing for Shinobi to be able to do, because a Shinobi often doesn't have a very good action. If you can't commit with the sword, there isn't much that a Shinobi can really do. So commanding a Sharpshooter to take another shot with that Sharpshooter, if you have a death from above Sharpshooter, you can shoot, you get an extra action back from killing, and the Shinobi can command, and now you have 2 actions and can shoot again. Command a Ranger to set on Overwatch, command an Assault to take another action. Often you want to dash your assaults forward, command, and then you're getting close encounters, and you haven't used running gun with the assault yet, so you can shoot twice at different enemies. Command is just a very, very nice thing to have. Leadership gives bonuses to will, dodge, and infiltration speed of soldiers who have served missions under this officer's command, and it stacks up, I think, up to 20 missions together. So this is a small bonus. It's not something that you'll notice unless you're paying attention, but it does count for something throughout the campaign for sure. Especially the bonus dodge is a pretty big deal. The infiltration speed can count for quite a lot as you get later on into the campaign. It's something to think about, and it's one incentive for, putting soldiers under the same officer every time. In practice, I find that it's not strong enough to force me to do that. I usually equip teams based on which soldiers I think will be best for the job. But even if you're doing that, you're going to have some leadership bonuses on different soldiers, just because they'll accidentally go on missions with different officers and start to build up that leadership, friendship, strength, bonus, perk, leadership number. At Second Lieutenant, you can pick between Oscar Mike and Focus Fire. Focus Fire spends an action to give cumulative aim bonuses and 1 armor piercing on attacks against the target for the rest of the turn. So I believe it's +4 aim each time your squad shoots at it. It's a pretty nice perk just for shooting at anything that has armor, really. I dislike it and think that it doesn't do that much, though. Couple of reasons. One, there are very simple ways to deal with enemies who require lots and lots of fire against them in this game. You can shut them down, you can sting grenade them, you can just kill them with your soldiers, usually without too much trouble. You can stasis them with a psi operative, you can incendiary grenade them, you can stun them with an assault, with an arc thrower. There are tons of easy ways to deal with something that has a lot of hit points if it's just one enemy. And so using this action with the Shinobi to get a little bit of extra damage on an enemy like that just doesn't really appeal to me very often. The 1 armor piercing is sort of nice. However, most enemies throughout the mid-game, and this is an early game perk, keep in mind, but most enemies all the way through mid-game are only going to have 2 armor, and AP rounds is the natural ammo to have on your soldiers through mid-game, in my opinion. And that shreds 2 armor, or pierces 2 armor, rather. So that 1 armor penetration isn't necessarily actually helping your shooting classes all that much. I think focus fire is fine, but Oscar Mike is my typical pick here. Spend an action to give all allies within command range +5 mobility for the remainder of the turn. You can use this once per mission. It does cost an action, and it's sort of weird that you're spending an action to make the rest of your squad faster, because if you need to like run to evac, then your Shinobi's screwed because it had to spend an action to do this. Oscar Mike is very, very powerful though. +5 mobility is a huge amount, and on a lot of Alpha Strike turns, that's going to be the difference between a soldier being able to flank or not, or, you know, a technical being able to get in range for a flamethrower or not. And this ability comes up in other situations where it can really break game mechanics. It comes up, for example, on stealth missions. If you have to hack a workstation, you can train up a rookie into an assault, and you can send the assault and the Shinobi, and once you're like within 3/4 of the map from the objective, all you have to do is throw evac with your assault. Your Shinobi hits Oscar Mike, hits command, the assault hits running gun. You now have an assault with like 22 mobility and 4 actions, and you can just run all the way across the map and hack the objective. So Oscar Mike lets you sort of break things, and is very, very strong for that reason. I'm not going to like be training them. There's no easy way to level up these officer perks that I know of, so typically I will take Oscar Mike here. At First Lieutenant, we're picking between Incoming and Get Some. Get Some gives +20 hit chance for your squad for the remainder of the turn. A very nice thing if you're shooting a lot, a very nice thing if you have Kubikiri on a Sharpshooter. However, Incoming is definitely my normal pick at First Lieutenant. The reasons are mainly that this is an early game perk, and Get Some, that extra crit is most relevant to late game squads with like lots of focused fire and whatever. And yeah, it's strong there, but it isn't really needed, and it certainly isn't needed right now. You can get by without it in late game is what I'm trying to say. Incoming is very strong at this point of the campaign when you have corporals and sergeants, because mechs are the most challenging enemy for you to face, and if you place 2 soldiers next to each other, a mech's always going to micro-missiles you. They just love to micro-missiles you. And if you hit Incoming, which is actually a free action, it doesn't even cost you an action, and it's on a cooldown, so you can theoretically do it multiple times per mission, you're not going to take damage from those micro-missiles. This ability, Incoming, just controls that mech without requiring an action, and you can like kill it next turn, whatever. You can control multiple mechs like this if you want. They'll all just missile you and do nothing. So Incoming is incredibly powerful for that reason. It's great in scrappy fights. It's great for solving problems that this stage of the game is presenting you, and for that reason I'm basically always taking Incoming. At Captain, we're picking between Trial by Fire and Jammer. Trial by Fire gives level ups to any soldiers below the rank of Sergeant if they successfully complete a mission with this officer, and it's really obvious what you use that for. If you're early in the campaign and your soldiers aren't leveled up fully yet, you may want a trial by fire officer or two to get those level ups onto those soldiers. You'll usually, by the time you've trained 1 or 2 trial by fire officers, have run out of any reason to have more, so you'll usually be going jammer on the rest of them. Once per battle, delay the arrival of incoming enemy reinforcements by 1 turn. If you're on like a reinforcements retaliation, what that does is delay the reinforcements who are going to come next turn, but it doesn't delay the rest of the reinforcements, so you get a turn with no reinforcements, but then the next turn you'll have 2 pods all at once, and then it's back to 1 each time. Can be a very nice perk to have on those reinforcement-based missions, but it's sort of a luxury. It's not really necessary. And then the last level up that I'm going to look at for this video is Major, where we're picking between Lead by Example and Collector, and for Shinobis we just always go Collector. Any kills of a non-human enemy by the squad have a 33% chance to gain 1 intel point. Advent guys are non-human, so non-human means like you can't kill civilians to do this, but Advent troopers do count as non-human for the purposes of Collector. So you're able to get, 5 extra intel per mission or something like that, and it adds up over the course of the campaign pretty quickly. Lead by Example Lead by Example looks at the difference between your aim, is it will and hack? Yeah, aim, will, and hack of your officer and the other soldiers within command range, and if the other soldiers have lower aim, will, or hack, it gives them half the difference between them and the officer. Lead by Example is a very strong perk to put on like 110 aim sharpshooter. It doesn't do very much on a Shinobi though, because you're just not going to have particularly high values for those. It also, in general, isn't that strong a thing to pursue because your classes who really care about aim do have high aim, as a general rule in your campaign. Your rangers, your sharpshooters, they all have high aim and they're all good at shooting guns. So if you make a sharpshooter officer to give some extra aim to your other classes, like, why do they care? Like, who's so invested in shooting that they desperately need that aim? For the most part, you're going to get like a little bit of value out of Overwatch fire, maybe, but that's about it for the most part. And so typically, I'm pretty happy to be taking Collector on a Shinobi officer. Lead by Example is sort of the only perk on all of the officer perks that might incline you to go for a different class as your officer. It might make you go for a ranger or a sharpshooter as your officer, but it's still not really powerful enough to have ever made me do that. Even when I've had quick steady sharpshooters, it just has never actually happened. Especially since sharpshooters you don't get as many of in a campaign, because Shinobis, like any Shinobi with any stats is fine, really. They all do the same things. They're dorky tanks. It doesn't matter that much what their sets are. Sharpshooters are like either Haven Advisors or A-Team, though, pretty much. Like if they have high aim, they go on missions and kill stuff. If they have low aim, they're very awkward soldiers who don't do much at all. And so because of that, I don't usually have time to train up all of these officer perks on my sharpshooters, and I'm pretty happy to just be sending them out to kill stuff in the mid and late game. Alright, so that's mid-game Shinobis. I hope you guys enjoyed looking at the officer perks as well, and I will see you next time. We'll be talking about the late game for Shinobis. Bye guys!